Hi guys, my name's Schiffer and I'd like to talk to you about the charging process for the water for the J cell. In front of me you'll see three cells. Looking from your left you'll see a 5-cylinder cell that would be suitable to run a car. I have temporarily placed a current on the top. Notice there's no outlets. Okay, so just sitting on there to show you the idea. The center cell is a 5-cylinder test cell, and a cell on the right is a 5-cylinder test cell also, but that is in a glass container. What I have done with these three cells is I've left them at three stages of a charging process. The first one on the left is a stage 1 cell. I'll explain that to you in a second. The middle one is what I call a stage 2 cell, and the one on your right is a stage 3 cell. A stage 1 cell is a cell that most people get to without really having tried too hard at all. This particular cell performs normal electrolysis. So what happens on any cell, I'll take the top off. If you connect a negative, as in the case of J cells in the center, and if you connect a positive to the outside cylinder, and you have an electrolyte or water that can conduct electricity in the middle, you will find that the cell will start creating hydrogen and oxygen. Depending on how much current you pass through the water will depend on how much hydrogen and oxygen this particular cell will create, or any of these cells. Remember, we are not interested in creating hydrogen and oxygen. We are interested in getting these cells to fill up with Orgone energy. Now, on a first cell, because it's not what I call a living cell, if I'll show you later on a top view, when we apply current to this first cell, we will notice a particular type of bubble formation. This type of bubble formation will be different to the bubble formation in the stage 2 cell and the stage 3 cell. With experience, by observing these different types of bubble formations, you will know at what stage of your charging of a water process you're at. So, a stage 1 cell is straight out electrolysis. There is nothing fancy. The cell is dead. There is no Orgone energy being accumulated in there. There is no breeding process occurring. It is normal electrolysis. Exactly the same as when your car alternator is charging your car battery. We are putting electricity across the cell. We have an ion flow within the cell. As a result of this ion flow, the hydrogen and oxygen is separated or dissociated out of the water, and we have bubbles. And we can observe these bubbles. Stage 1 cell, straight electrolysis. A stage 2 cell. Again, I will show you the top view of these very, very soon. In a stage 2 cell, we have gone past straight electrolysis. The cell has what I call seeded. The Orgone energy has started to form in the cell, but due to excess leaking, if you like, the Orgone can never build up at a level high enough to go to the breeding stage or a useful stage which allows us to run the car. So stage 2 cell, you will notice it will have a different bubble formation to the stage 1 cell. The bubble size will be different. The dispersion from the middle out will be different. The retention or the duration of a bubble in the water will be different, and the surface tension will be different. So stage 2 cell is a cell that the Orgone energy has started to accumulate in, but due to its leakage, it is unable to breed or create sufficient Orgone density to run a car. Stage 2 cell. The stage 3 cell is what we all strive for. There are very, very few people that get to this stage because they do a lot of things that are wrong. One of the things they do, which is highly, highly incorrect, is when they get no progress with a stage 1 or a stage 2 cell, they think they're better, or should I say more is better. They increase the amount of current through the electrolyte. They leave the cell on longer. I will show you in a moment that you only require 30 seconds, no more. After 30 seconds you will be able to see what stage these cells are at, if it's a dead cell, if it's a seeding cell, or if it's a breeding cell. That's all it needs, 30 seconds. Not days, not hours, not weeks, whatever. Okay, now stage 3 cell, you'll see here in a moment, it's got a completely different characteristic on the top, but a stage 3 cell is a cell that the Orgone energy is accumulating inside the water, The orgone density reaches a finite amount. It reaches as much density as it can that the water can support. And what it does after that, the excess orgone density is converted into electricity. And that conversion from the orgone state to electricity again can be shown to you and seen by the bubble formation in the cell. I'll repeat that. A stage 1 cell, blind Freddy and Doc can do this. It is straight out electrolysis, nothing fancy at all. All this cell will ever produce is hydrogen and oxygen in its present state. A stage 2 cell is the next stage up, where the orgone has entered into the cell. But due to deficiencies of a cell or processes you use in doing that are incorrect, or the water that is wrong or whatever, this stage is leaking so quickly that the cell cannot get to the breeding stage. It is like a bucket with a big hole in the bottom. You can try to fill it up, it will never overflow at the top. It's always leaking out. That's a stage 2 cell. A stage 3 cell it's full of orgone, and the density has now reached a density level that water cannot store this energy anymore. It has to release it. It releases it as electricity, and also releases it in a form that if we have an outlet at the top, we can run into our car, and the motor will now run off this particular cell. The car will never run off a stage 1 to stage 2. A lot of cells can get up to stage 3, but due to maybe environmental conditions, temperature, the people around it or whatever, it can drop back to a stage 2 or even a stage 1. So a stage 3 cell does not necessarily have to stay a stage 3 forever. I will explain it to you also a little bit later on. So for this first little part, there are 3 cells. The next view you'll see, you won't see my ugly face talking to you. You'll see top views of these 3 cells and a different type of bubble formation. The top is off. We haven't zoomed in to show you what's going to occur at the top. At this stage I have connected the negative to the bottom of the cell central post. I have a positive, and I will connect it to the positive of the outer cylinder as soon as we zoom in. Alright, we're nearly there. We're going as close as we can to show you the action. I'm connecting the positive on now. You'll see a bubble action starting from the middle, working out. Notice the bubble size. There's a few large bubbles popping out the top. It hasn't settled down as yet. And there's basically a steady flow from cylinder to cylinder with less action towards the outside. This cell is at the moment is performing conventional electrolysis. You could light some of these bubbles if you wanted to, and you would get a bang. Nothing much is going to change. As long as we leave a current on, it will perform the same. There's little bits of misty steam coming off as well. So on the stage 1 cell, that's the action you will get. If I turn up the current, of course the action would get more severe. If I left it on for a long period of time, of course the water would heat up, but you will not progress into stage 2 or 3 with this system. What I will do now, I will disconnect the positive off the cell. You'll see that the action stops very, very quickly. The water is clearing up, all the bubbles are dying, and within, I'd say, a minute or so, the water will be clear again. There is no surface tension, and the water will clear, which is completely different to what you'll see in stage 3. In stage 3, you'll see the bubble will remain, and even a day or 2 days later, there will still be some bubble on the top. So this stage 1 cell is slowly dying. There's a little bit of action still occurring, few bubbles popping up here and there, but basically at about this period now you can see that that's it, that's about it now. The water has cleared up pretty well completely, there's no bubbles left, and that is it. So to summarise a stage 1 cell, I'll do it again. I'll put the current on. The moment you put the card on, you will see action, bubble action. It doesn't seem to have any progression from one cylinder to the next. It just seems to bubble all over. Some big bubbles, some small bubbles. And I'll take the current off now. The action stops, and as previously, in less than a minute, or in about a minute, there'll be no more bubbles and the water will clear up. That is a stage 1 cell. I will move now on to stage 2 cell. We're looking at a stage 2 cell as before. This cell hasn't been charged for a day. There's a slight amount of surface tension. It's a little bit hard to see, and sometimes there is residual bubbles, but basically after about a day it looks very much like a stage 1 cell. It is pretty well dead. Remember, the stage 2 cell has only seeded. It is not breeding. The seed, once the electricity is taken off, will dissipate and the cell will just revert to being normal water like the stage 1 cell. So I have got a negative probe connected to one side. I will be putting this positive onto the other side as soon as we zoom in. Okay, zoomed in, I shall connect the lead on. Now notice the bubble action, it's different. It goes and bursts from one ring to the next, different to the stage 1. And you'll notice the bubble action is also different. There's more bubbles of both types, both large and small. A stage 3 cell will also look exactly like this at the very start. Notice the big bubbles. They create quite good bangs for people who love banging things. But you'll notice a strange thing that occurs with a stage 2 cell. Very, very soon, all this interesting stage 3 action will dissipate. The big bubbles will also disappear, and a cell will go back to being a stage 1 cell. What has happened is, because the cell is very leaky, and it really doesn't like the electrolysis that's occurring, and due to the magnetism in the cell, because this is a faulty cell, the cell will revert to being a stage 1 cell. So for the very first, say, 20 seconds, we had stage 3, we had activity, and it's something to get excited about as compared to stage 1. But you'll notice now, the larger bubbles have stopped being produced from the middle. We've gone back to this flow in each compartment, as in the stage 1 cell, and from here on, it's all bad news. It's just going to produce smaller and smaller bubbles, and really, nothing much more is going to occur. So the difference in a stage 2 cell at the initial startup has been different bubble activity, different initial burst of ionization from cylinder to cylinder, and you will find now, as I remove the power off, I'm taking the power off one side, that just like the stage 1 cell, the bubbles die out. There's one big fella here to go, yeah, come on boy. The bubbles die out, the water clears out, and the cell is dead. There is nothing, no more breathing, no more activity. When a current went off, the cell has also died, exactly like a stage 1 cell. So, to differentiate between a stage 1 and a stage 2 cell, the only difference you'll be able to see is at the very start by the bubble activity. At the end, they will end up the same, meaning there's going to be no bubbles after an hour or a day. As you can see, there's only 2 little bubbles to go, and that's the end of it. Stage 2 cell, it starts to seed and then it dies. I will put the current on again just to show you what happens at the very, very start. Now don't fall asleep, this is fairly quick. Okay, notice there's a quick little spurts of activity from compartment to compartment. We have a big bubbles, we have a small bubbles, and then a cell settles down to being a stage 1 cell. So there's only activity in the first, say, half a minute or so, and after that, you lose it. This is a seeding cell, as opposed to just a stage 1 cell, which is just plain electrolysis. Again, this cell will not run the car. Okay, that's about all I can show you with that particular cell. I will take the power off now, and we'll move on to stage 3. Okay, we'll move over to the stage 3 cell, which is the cell I'm pointing at. We have just completed with stage 2. On a stage 3 cell, I still have a top on. because I want to show you what this cell looks like after having been left undisturbed for a day. I want to show you what's on top of the water as compared to a stage 1 or stage 2 cell. Remember, a stage 1 and a stage 2 cell, after about a minute, you go back to clear water with no bubbles whatsoever. We will zoom in and have a look what's happening under this lid. Okay, we zoomed in. I'll take the lid off and notice the bubbles on this cell which has not been touched for a day. Notice the activity. Notice that some bubbles have just died now because the lid is off. It doesn't like air. When you're not using your cells, please put the lids back on. Notice the foam, notice the surface tension. Only a stage 3 cell will look like this after a day. As you know, the other 2 cells after a minute went back to being clear. What I want to do now is to show you the pulsating or the living force energy or the conversion of the excess orgone into electricity by showing you what happens at the surface of the water. To do that, I must remove this froth. I'll do that by using a little paper towel, as you can see, and I will remove enough froth off the top so you can see the pulsation when the cell is first turned on. This pulsation lasts and keeps going, but because the bubbles build up, they cover the pulsations and you will not be able to see it. Okay, now what's going to happen is that bubbles are going to form just like in a stage 2 cell. The bubble formation is going to be slightly different. Instead of jumping from compartment to compartment, it's going to seem to cover the whole lot at a reasonable speed, but then you see it pulsing in pockets at the top of the cell as the excess density is converted to electricity. Remember, this is a stage 3 cell that is breathing. That water is as full of orgone as you can get. I'm now going to connect the lead. Please watch this. The lead is on. Here's the action. Very, very similar to stage 2 at the very, very start. It is spreading out in a field. It is covered. And now you will see a pulsation in each compartment pulsing as the excess orgone is being converted to electricity, static electricity. You will notice, of course, now that the cell is completely frothing different to the stage 2 cell. They're white bubbles. They're pretty well the same size. The pulsation is still occurring under the bubbles, and slowly you will start losing the size of the pulsations as the froth gets thicker and thicker, and you won't be able to see the water surface anymore. So we are looking at a breeding stage 3 cell, a cell that can run a car, a cell that can be used for medicinal uses, a cell that's creating an excess of orgone density that is being converted into electricity. If we watch this cell, that froth is going to get higher and higher and higher. Eventually, it will fill the container and it will overflow, as Joe has demonstrated. But instead of using 25 amps and 50 amps, for all these cells I have used 1 amp, 12 volts. I can speed up the action to any speed you like. If I put a match to that cell at the moment, it will do exactly what Joe says. It will pull your ears in, it will ring, it will get rid of your neighbours, all the interesting things that this cell can do. We are not interested in doing that because noise is detrimental to a negative cell and will take quite a considerable period of time to build up charge again. As you can see, the action is continuous while I've been talking. I've probably been raving on now for about a minute. The bubble activity is going on. As I say, if you're interested in creating froth, which we're not about, all you have to do now is increase the power to this cell and it would have been flowing over the sides by now. So we're looking at a living stage 3 cell. I will try and remove that froth for you and see if I can show you the pulsations at the bottom. Okay, you can see it. It's pulsing compartment to compartment, which is impossible because the water is separated by the compartment. It has got a life force, it has got pulsing activity, and again this froth will keep building up. As you can see, I have wiped some off. It's a clear white froth. There is no brown residue. It is a living, breathing stage 3 cell. I will remove the power. I've removed the power now. You will notice there's still a bit of activity. You will lose some of the bubbles, but it will not disappear and fade away like a stage 2 or stage 1 cell. You can see the activity is kind of dropping right down. Remember, normally I would have a lid on by now to stop the orgone leaking into the air. Okay? You've got a fair idea of the surface tension now. The majority of bubbles from electrolysis have now disappeared. You have settled down to the long-staying bubbles, and although it will clear down a little bit more, it will settle down to this stage. And as I say, with a lid off, I wouldn't expect this to last overnight, but with a lid on, definitely the next day or the day after, 2 days, even 3 days, you will still see some bubbles on the top like that. The behaviour of a stage 3 cell is completely different to the behaviour of a stage 1 or 2 cell. The two differences are, we're looking at one of them now. Even with the power removed, we have got surface tension, we have bubbles, the cell is still breathing. The other difference is when I reapply the power, which I'll leave now for you, the bubble activity is different. Okay, the power is on now. You'll see that the bubbling travels at different fronts. You can already see the pulsation occurring in the different compartments. There it is now. It's a very beautiful pulsation action now. It sticks out very well. So very soon this pulsation is going to be covered by bubbles. But there is a stage 3 cell performing again, as I said, well within 30 seconds. I will take that lead off now and cap it and say thank you very much. Thank you very much for your little cells. You're good little troopers. And I'll go on the next session. Where are we? Let's summarise. What's the quickest way of summarising? Right, I've demonstrated to you stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 cells. All these cells have been adjusted with the electrolyte to all pass 1 amp at 12 volts, so the action is directly comparable. You have seen, again in summary, the performance of a stage 1, a dead, normal electrolysis cell. You have seen the performance of a stage 2 cell that has seeded and nearly breeded, which is the next stage that you strive for. You have seen the performance of a stage 3 cell that has breeded, that is overproducing, and it will run a car. As mentioned before, neither 2 or 1 are any good to you, unless you want to go to stage 1 and try to run your car with hydrogen, in which case you have to increase the amount of electrolyte, the amount of current, the amount of cells, and that's not where I want to go. That's somebody else's ball game. I was a little bit disappointed when I looked at the pulsations of a stage 3 cell in daylight. What I have found is when I look at it in my garage or in a house, when there's a fluorescent light involved, it strobes it a little bit better, and the pulsations are more synchronized with 100 cycles of the fluorescent tube, and it's more obvious. But it was pulsating, or should I say, the action was completely different to the other 2 cells. So, in adding this little section, and in summarising the summary, we have got 3 possible stages of our charged water, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Only stage 3 will run the car, and how you make a good stage